Tonight, the alarming escalation with North Korea. The UN Security Council calls an emergency meeting over the new threat, a never-before-seen missile capable of hitting the U.S. Tonight, how the U.S. could respond as President Trump prepares to meet with Vladimir Putin overseas. Deadly police ambush. An officer and mother of three killed in what police call an assassination. What was the motive? Selfie outrage. A congressman under fire for taking this video inside a former Nazi gas chamber. Amelia Earhart mystery solved? Does a newly found photo finally answer one of the biggest aviation puzzles of all time? And tennis tug of war. The young fan who had his Wimbledon keepsake ripped out of his hands, and the star player who turned to social media to make it up to him. Nightly News begins right now.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening. I'm Savannah Guthrie in for Lester. Tonight, emergency meetings, frenzied phone calls. The U.S. is scrambling to deal with a North Korea that is more aggressive than ever and now closer than ever to being able to deliver a nuclear blow to the United States. The North's test firing of an intercontinental ballistic missile on the 4th of July, no less, was a dramatic and disturbing message and a technical milestone. And tonight, sources tell NBC News the U.S. was caught by surprise. We begin tonight with NBC's Janice Mackey-Frere in Seoul, South Korea.
Tonight, new pictures of what North Korea claims is its first intercontinental ballistic missile, which could strike the United States. The U.S. calling it a new global threat in an emergency meeting today of the UN Security Council.
Time is short. Action is required. The world is on notice.
There was new taunting, too. Kim Jong-un said the missile test was meant to slap the American bastards in their face, that it was a 4th of July gift package for the Yankees, and the showdown with the U.S. had reached its final phase. U.S. and South Korean forces here fired back with a military drill. Precision strike missiles meant to show they're prepared for war. And now, in stunning comments, the commander of American troops here saying all-out war is possible. Self-restraint, which is a choice, is all that separates armistice and war. We're able to change our choice when so ordered, said General Vincent Brooks. Tonight, the Pentagon revealing new details on the North Korean test, confirming the missile has not been seen before and withstood re-entry to the atmosphere, a key technical hurdle the North Koreans had been trying to master. This latest test, also a dangerous boost to the confidence of Kim Jong-un, who's dramatically increasing the number of missile tests after an all-time high last year.
He is basically saying, hey, the G20, you are all the big shots meeting, but I'm the biggest threat to the international community, and you need to deal with me. That's the message he's sending.
It's early Thursday morning here, and while crisis is nothing new to South Korea, there is a fresh sense of urgency. The president here had met with President Trump in Washington. North Korea topped the agenda. They say at this point, statements are not enough. Savannah?
All right, Janice, and we have heard that tough talk by American officials, but just how can the United States confront this new threat by North Korea and rein in that regime? Put simply, there are no easy options. Tonight, our chief foreign affairs correspondent, Andrea Mitchell, takes a look.
Tonight, a grave new threat for a new president. A threat sources tell NBC News President Obama warned Donald Trump about when they first met, that the North Koreans were working on a long-range missile that could reach the U.S. mainland, eventually with a nuclear weapon. Still, multiple sources tell NBC News the height and range of this two-stage missile, shooting straight up more than 1,700 miles, dramatically farther than the orbiting space station, and at a lower trajectory capable of hitting Alaska, took U.S. intelligence by surprise. The U.S. options are few, each with critical risks. First, a preemptive military strike, downplayed by the defense secretary.
The bottom line is it would be a catastrophic war.
That's because North Korean artillery would likely retaliate against 100,000 American civilians and 28,000 U.S. troops nearby, plus 25 million South Koreans around Seoul. Plus, their new long-range missile is mobile. Just finding it to take it out is almost impossible.
by putting a missile on the back of this massive wheeled truck. They can move the missile around and catch us off guard.
Another illegal option, assassination using U.S. Special Forces. And if that fails,
when we use regime change, that's the #1 trigger that would cause the use of a nuclear weapon by Kim Jong-un.
Then there is a cyber attack sabotaging future missile launches. The U.S. did that to Iran's nuclear program. Or a naval blockade if China would cooperate. But today the president tweeting, trade between China and North Korea grew almost 40% in the first quarter. So much for China working with us. We had to give it a try. The most likely option, dialing up the economic pressure on China to take action against North Korea. But China is refusing. And finally, there is a diplomatic option the U.S. has been resisting, negotiating with the rogue regime. Savannah?
Andrea Mitchell in Washington, thank you. The president arrived in Poland tonight with another tough leader on his mind, Russia's Vladimir Putin. On Friday, the two men will meet for the first time on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Germany. Will there be a confrontation, and just what is on each leader's agenda? NBC's chief White House correspondent Hallie Jackson traveling with the president.
With a few final words before leaving Washington, President Trump predicting we're going to do very well, stepping onto his plane optimistic, stepping off it into the shadow of Russia. In Poland, the president's first stop, the threat from Moscow looms decades after the Cold War, as Warsaw looks for protection through NATO and for a commitment to the alliance from President Trump.
Because we are in NATO, so it has to be a very, very close connection.
But what happens in Poland? Only the pregame to what everyone will be watching on Friday in Germany at the G20 summit. The first face-to-face between President Trump and Vladimir Putin. Facing off against a calculating, crafty veteran, so skilled at political theater. In a 2007 meeting with Germany's Angela Merkel, whose fear of dogs is well documented, Putin brought his Labrador.
Right now, we're not getting along with Russia at all. We may be at an all-time low.
On the agenda for Russia, talks about Syria, Ukraine, and the fight against ISIS. The president's agenda, a little looser, with now even Republicans calling on him to confront Putin about Russia's 2016 election interference.
He is going to try to press President Trump to say, we, the two of us, are allies fighting for the interests of our two countries against the fake media, against the deep state. We can't let them get in the way of our cooperation together. And that's going to present a challenge for how President Trump responds.
Aside from whatever policy issues come up, the optics of this meeting will be scrutinized like almost nothing else. That first handshake between these two leaders setting the tone for what will be one of President Trump's most important global relationships. Savannah?
Hallie Jackson traveling with the president. Thank you. And turning back home now to a New York police officer and mother of 3 killed in the line of duty. Investigators say she was assassinated in an overnight ambush. And tonight they're trying to determine whether the gunman who was killed near the scene had a grudge against the badge. NBC's Ron Allen now with details.
An unprovoked random assassination. NYPD officer Miosotis Familia, 48, a 12-year veteran, shot in the head at point-blank range through the window of a marked mobile command center. The desperate fight to save her life ending some 3 hours later. The gunman, Alexander Bonds, 34, armed with a stolen weapon, chased down and shot dead by responding officers about a block away. A twice-convicted felon out on parole. Senior NYPD officials tell NBC News they are investigating whether Bonds is the man in these videos making anti-police statements posted on a Facebook page believed to belong to him.
Because I'm here to tell you, police go with police.
Today, outside the slain officer's precinct, tributes and grief, mourners paying their respects. Neighbors remembering the mother of 3, a former nurse who chose a second career in her 30s and became a cop.
She was just a very sweet person. It's very, very sad.
Jamie Gonzalez says drugs, guns, and gangs are everywhere in this neighborhood, and officers like Familia are making a difference.
Things seem to be quieting down a little bit until yesterday.
The murder eerily reminiscent of the 2014 ambush of 2 NYPD officers in their patrol car. Last year, officers killed in the line of duty spiked to 135, only 6 women, 21 ambushed. And today, one of New York's finest.
A female police officer attacked out of nowhere, doing what she believed in and doing the job she loved.
Ron Allen, NBC News, New York.
The July 4th holiday weekend was also a deadly one on the streets of Chicago. Over the 4 days, more than 100 people were shot, 12 were killed. The violence surpassed even last year when the 4th fell on a Monday, and 66 people were shot, 4 killed over that 3-day weekend. Now to the explosion of outrage at a Louisiana congressman. He has now apologized for a video he made inside the Nazi concentration camp Auschwitz. It's not the first time he's faced controversy. NBC's Gabe Gutierrez has the story.
Said they would squeeze 700 people in here.
It's not what Louisiana Congressman Clay Higgins said, but where that's stirring outrage. This 5-minute video shared on Higgins' Facebook page was recorded inside a former Nazi death camp, the Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial and Museum in Poland.
3 sets of ovens.
As he tours a gas chamber, Higgins warns the U.S. should be more aggressive in fighting terrorism.
This is why Homeland Security must be squared away.
On Twitter, museum officials scolded the congressman. Inside a former gas chamber, there should be mournful silence. It's not a stage. The Anti-Defamation League and the Anne Frank Center also took notice.
It was pure and simple a grotesque exploitation of the Holocaust for his own political purposes. How dare Congressman Higgins use Auschwitz as his own personal TV studio?
Late today, Higgins retracted the video. My intent was to offer a reverent homage to those who were murdered, he says. My sincere apology for any unintended pain is extended. This is not the first time the freshman Republican congressman and former sheriff has courted controversy. In a Facebook post last month after the London terror attack, Higgins wrote that the free world, all of Christendom, is at war with Islamic horror. And then when it comes to radicalized suspects, the U.S. should kill them all.
The United States is more accessible to terror like this.
Tonight, he is apologetic after critics say this message went too far. Gabe Gutierrez, NBC News.
And now to a story that has captivated the world since it broke on the Today Show this morning. A never-before-seen photo that investigators from the History Channel believe may finally reveal what happened to the legendary Amelia Earhart and her navigator after their plane disappeared in 1937. Tonight, our Tom Costello has even more new revelations.
25 years ago, the world's most famous aviatrix was missing over the Pacific.
The question tonight, does this photograph found by History Channel investigators in the National Archives prove Amelia Earhart and navigator Fred Noonan ended up in Japanese custody?
We've discovered that Amelia Earhart survived her final flight and landed safely in the Marshall Islands.
You're confident?
We are very confident.
The photograph is marked Marshall Islands Joliet Atoll in 1937 under Japanese military control. On the left, a man standing next to a sign, and there, sitting on the dock, what appears to be a woman with short hair wearing pants like Earhart. Facial recognition expert Kent Gibson overlaid the photo of the man with file photos of navigator Noonan.
The hairline is the most distinctive characteristic. It's a very sharp receding hairline. The nose is very prominent.
Gibson then compared body measurements of the seated woman with previous photos of Earhart. In both cases, striking similarities.
I usually go from not likely to very likely to extremely likely. And I'd say this is very likely.
And something else. The woman on the dock is staring at the Japanese ship Koshu, which is towing a barge with something measuring 38 feet long, the same length as Earhart's plane. For decades, locals have said the plane crashed in the Marshalls and the Japanese ship Koshu took it away. Also in the National Archives, this catalog of government files on Earhart, referencing 170 pages, including information that Earhart was a prisoner in the Marshall Islands. But that document is missing. NBC News reached out to the Japanese Foreign Ministry, Defense Ministry, and their National Archives, all of which said they have no evidence of Amelia Earhart ever in their custody.
We believe that the United States government knew Amelia Earhart was in the Marshalls and was in Japanese custody.
While not everyone is convinced, history investigators say they'll reveal more in their Sunday documentary, including evidence that Earhart and Noonan died in a Japanese prison camp in Saipan. Tom Costello, NBC News, Washington.
And still ahead tonight.